a 15-year-old ballet prodigy, suddenly vanished under mysterious circumstances. At first, police assumed it was a typical case of teenage rebellion, emotional instability, pressure, and a decision to run away. But as investigators looked deeper, a far more disturbing possibility began to take shape. Someone had been watching her from the shadows. Someone driven by desperation. This individual had quietly been searching for a way to assume her identity, to step into a life that was never meant to be theirs. This case unfolds just before the turn of the new millennium and would go on to shock Australia. The girl at the center of the story is Rachel Barber. Her grandfather, Ivan Southall, was a well-known children's author in Australia. By her early teens, Rachel herself was already being recognized as a rising ballet talent. The story begins in Melbourne, the capital of Victoria in southern Australia. Known for its cultural scene and architectural elegance, the city has often ranked among the most livable in the world. Wide streets and carefully preserved historic buildings give Melbourne a distinct character. Rachel grew up in Mount Waverley, a quiet and safe suburb in the city's eastern area. At 15, she lived in a stable, supportive household and possessed remarkable natural ability in ballet. At the time, she was enrolled in a specialized dance academy focused on classical ballet training. With her refined appearance and stage presence, she also worked part-time as a model. Teachers and classmates described her as energetic, friendly, and well-liked. Then came an afternoon that seemed completely ordinary. Rachel finished rehearsal, waved goodbye to her classmates, and even said she would see them the next day. But from that day forward, she never returned to school. Monday, May 1st, 1999, marked the beginning of a new week. That morning, after a restful weekend, Rachel appeared alert and in good spirits. She got ready early and asked her father to drive her to the tram stop. She had loved dance since childhood. While her academic performance was average, she transformed the moment she stepped onto a stage. After completing middle school, she repeatedly asked her parents to allow her to focus entirely on ballet. Eventually, they agreed and transferred her to a ballet school in Richmond, known for its intensive training. Because it was the opportunity she had long hoped for, Rachel valued every lesson and was never late. The school was located west of her home. She attended 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday. Rachel once suggested commuting alone, but her family was uncomfortable with that idea. Instead, her father, Mike Barber, handled transportation. Each morning, he drove her to a tram stop near Waverley Park. Every evening, at 6:15 p.m., he returned to pick her up. That morning, father and daughter said goodbye at the station as usual. Mike then went back to work. At around 6 p.m., he arrived early, just like every other day. At exactly 6:15, passengers began stepping off the tram. He scanned the crowd. Rachel was not among them. He told himself she might have stayed late at school or been delayed. But as the platform emptied and the last of the commuters disappeared, she still had not arrived. His heart began to race. Still, he tried to rationalize it. Perhaps she had decided to surprise the family and taken a taxi home. At that time, missing a connection often meant there was no quick way to contact someone. Unable to wait any longer, Mike drove home. When he opened the door, he saw only his wife, and she told him something that made everything collapse. Rachel had not come home. As darkness settled in, a deep sense of dread took hold. The couple immediately contacted police. According to the initial report, the missing person was Rachel Barber, 15 years old, born in Melbourne, the eldest of 3 sisters. Her family was financially stable. Her father was a toy designer. Her mother, Elizabeth Barber, was a children's writer. Her grandfather, Ivan Southall, was an influential name in Australian youth literature. Raised in such an environment, Rachel had developed discipline and self-awareness from a young age. Stories about growth, responsibility, and courage written by her mother and grandfather were part of her daily life. When she was around 7 years old, her grandmother once took her to see a ballet performance. Watching the dancers move gracefully across the stage, Rachel's eyes lit up. On the way home, she could not stop talking about what she had seen. As soon as they arrived, she told her parents she wanted to learn ballet. From that point on, she rarely missed weekend practice. Even after entering secondary school, though she once wanted to devote herself entirely to dance, she respected her parents' wishes and completed her general education while continuing to train seriously. It wasn't until the year before her disappearance that Rachel was officially accepted into the Ballet Academy in Richmond, the school she had dreamed of attending for years. As she grew older, her appearance and stage presence began to stand out even more among her peers. That confidence helped her secure part-time modeling work. Independent by nature, Rachel carefully managed the money she earned, saving it to buy ballet shoes and clothing she truly wanted. To her parents, she was a responsible daughter. To her 2 younger sisters, she was someone to look up to. That was why her disappearance felt completely out of character. Her mother feared something terrible had happened and repeatedly urged police to act quickly. But the initial response from authorities was far different from what the family expected. Investigators believed that at 15, running away was not unusual. They also noted that Rachel had taken her favorite backpack with her, packed with personal belongings. She had savings from modeling as well. Based on those details, police quickly labeled the situation as a voluntary runaway case and declined to open a formal criminal investigation. Despite her parents' objections, officers maintained their position. They reassured the family that teenagers often leave home temporarily and usually return once their money runs out. With no official urgency from law enforcement, Rachel's parents took matters into their own hands. That same night, they printed missing person flyers and posted them throughout nearby streets. They visited shops near the tram station and even searched through less secure neighborhoods, asking anyone who might have seen her. Within days, the local community was aware of the disappearance. Volunteers joined the search effort. Public concern began to grow. As Rachel remained missing and media attention increased, police were forced to reconsider. The case was eventually reclassified as an official missing person investigation. Detectives began by thoroughly searching Rachel's bedroom. In a corner of her desk, they found a handwritten note. Handwriting analysis confirmed it was hers. The message was brief, but puzzling. It mentioned going to meet Manny at the tram stop, referenced 50 to 80 Australian dollars, and noted 3 special items. The name Manny was familiar to her parents. His full name was Emmanuel Carrero, Rachel's boyfriend. They had first met while modeling part-time and later realized they attended the same school. Their relationship gradually developed. Manny was artistically inclined, wrote music, and had even composed songs for Rachel. Friends described their relationship as genuine and positive. Rachel had never hidden it from her family. The meaning of the note, however, left her parents confused. Police interpreted it differently. Investigators speculated that the mention of money and 3 special items could refer to medical expenses or something more sensitive. Combined with the reference to meeting Manny, they considered the possibility that Rachel had encountered a personal problem and chosen to hide it from her family. Some officers even suggested that her parents focus more attention on their 2 younger daughters instead of concentrating entirely on Rachel. For the family, these assumptions felt like a second blow. They viewed them as unfounded and damaging. They believed that if Rachel were in trouble, she would have come to them rather than disappear without explanation. Police interviewed Manny. By then, he had also been unable to reach Rachel for several days and was visibly distressed. Verification of his whereabouts showed that on the day Rachel vanished, he had gone home after school and had not been with her. However, Manny provided an important detail. That afternoon, Rachel had excitedly told him she had seen a pair of shoes priced at $100 and planned to buy them the next day. Manny was surprised. He did not know where she would get that kind of money. Rachel had vaguely mentioned that she had found a new, high-paying job, but did not provide details. The mention of a better-paying job raised new concerns for investigators. They briefly considered whether Rachel might have been involved in something illegal. That theory was quickly dismissed. Her savings came almost entirely from legitimate modeling income. Aside from small allowances from her family, her financial records were clean. Still, both of her parents acknowledged that Rachel had mentioned this new opportunity before. With each theory collapsing, the investigation reached another dead end. At that point, detectives shifted focus. They reasoned that Rachel might have shared more with friends her own age. Officers visited the ballet school in Richmond, hoping that classmates could reveal more about the mysterious job she had referenced shortly before disappearing. The ballet school Rachel attended was located in Richmond, a busy and fast-growing district not far from central Melbourne. The area blended commercial energy with a vibrant arts community. Inside the school, conversations often revolved around auditions, stage performances, and the ambitions of teenagers determined to succeed in the performing arts. Rachel, confident and naturally gifted, had many friends there. According to classmates, she behaved completely normally on the day she disappeared. If anything, she seemed more excited than usual. That excitement was tied to what she described as a clear plan to earn a significant amount of money. It was the same new opportunity she had mentioned to Manny. To understand what happened, it is necessary to return to the morning of May 1st, 1999, and follow Rachel's movements that day. That morning began as usual. She was driven to the tram stop and arrived at school on time. Shortly after entering, she pulled aside a male classmate and quietly told him she had found a chance to make a lot of money. Curious, he asked what the opportunity was and whether he could join. Rachel stopped herself mid-conversation and chose not to reveal details. She said it was a secret and promised to explain the next day. The phrase, "next day," is critical. It suggests that Rachel believed whatever she planned to do that evening was safe. She expected to return to school as normal. There was no indication she intended to run away or disappear. Later that afternoon, she met Manny again and repeated that she had something important planned. Even with him, she withheld specifics. Around 4 p.m., during a break between classes, Rachel asked a friend whether she could get a ride after school. This was unusual. She normally went straight to the tram stop to head home, and the direction she requested did not match her usual route. Rachel explained that she would not be going home immediately. Instead, she planned to stop by Bridge Road to visit an old female friend. Bridge Road was less than a kilometer north of the school, an area filled with fashion stores and small boutiques popular with young people. However, at approximately 5:30 p.m., after classes ended, Rachel changed her mind and said she would walk there alone. About 15 minutes later, as streetlights began turning on along Church Street near the school, a student saw Rachel for what would become the last confirmed sighting in that area. She was walking north toward Bridge Road in the opposite direction of her usual route to the tram stop. Sensing something unusual, the friend offered to accompany her. Rachel declined and insisted on going alone. They parted ways. Based on witness statements, police narrowed their focus to two key elements: the money-making plan and the mysterious female friend Rachel claimed she was meeting. Because of her appearance, Rachel was noticeable in public. Investigators initially believed she and the friend likely did not stay long on Bridge Road. If they had met, they may have quickly moved elsewhere, which could explain why no shop owners or pedestrians clearly remembered seeing her. Police asked Rachel's parents whether she had any close female friends living in Richmond. After reviewing her social circle, they confirmed they knew all of her friends and none lived in that area, especially no one who could both be close to Rachel and offer her a high-paying opportunity. This suggested that, for some reason, Rachel had kept this meeting secret from everyone. She may have believed she was pursuing a promising opportunity, unaware that it could have been a trap carefully arranged in advance. 1 week after her disappearance, the investigation stalled. Then, police received a crucial phone call that shifted the entire direction of the case. The caller was a former dance classmate named Allison. After hearing about Rachel's disappearance, she recalled an important detail. On the evening of May 1st, she had seen Rachel. But Rachel was not heading north toward Bridge Road. Instead, she was in Prahran, a district south of the school. More importantly, she was not alone. Allison reported that Rachel was sitting beside an older, heavyset woman. The two appeared engaged in quiet conversation and seemed familiar with each other. Allison later saw them exit public transport together and disappear into the crowd. This information immediately revealed that the earlier search direction had been incorrect. The woman Rachel intended to meet may have been this unidentified adult, and rather than staying near Bridge Road, they traveled directly toward another location. That would explain why no one in the shopping area remembered seeing her. Prahran was approximately 3 kilometers from the ballet school. If Rachel had arranged to meet someone, the meeting must have been planned in advance. The pressing question became how she organized it without her parents knowing. At that time, Rachel did not own a mobile phone, and modern messaging platforms did not exist. The only way to reach a student was by calling the family landline. Detectives reasoned that if this had been a serious plan, the two individuals involved would have needed an extended conversation. Rachel's weekdays were tightly scheduled, leaving little free time. The most practical window for a long call would have been the weekend, when she was home. Acting on that assumption, investigators reviewed the Barber household's call records for the week before the disappearance. They identified an unusual call on Sunday evening, the 28th of May, 1999. The call originated from Prahran and lasted approximately 15 minutes. Rachel's parents later recalled that both of them had been occupied with household tasks that night, while the younger daughters were in their room. No one else answered the phone. That meant Rachel was almost certainly the person on the line for the entire duration. Police concluded that whatever had been arranged was likely finalized during that conversation. Tracing the number led officers to an apartment in Prahran registered to Caroline Red Robertson. When the name Caroline surfaced, Rachel's mother, Elizabeth Barber, was stunned. Caroline was not a stranger. She was 5 years older than Rachel, and years earlier, the two families had lived on the same street, less than 100 meters apart. At that time, the families were friendly, and the children often spent time together. Although older and seemingly more mature, Caroline had even been hired as a babysitter for Rachel and her 2 younger sisters for a period. In Rachel's childhood memory, Caroline was a familiar and trusted figure. Adults remembered Caroline differently. Her parents had divorced early, and she lived with her mother. Neighbors described her as emotionally unstable. Caroline's mother had confided repeatedly in Elizabeth, sometimes breaking down in tears. Elizabeth once suggested psychological treatment, but Caroline resisted strongly, and no formal care was ever pursued. Few could have imagined that a former neighbor, once trusted with childcare, would become central to Rachel's disappearance. On the 12th of May, 1999, 11 days after Rachel vanished, police executed a search warrant at Caroline's Prahran apartment. Officers knocked for an extended period, but received no response. When they forced entry, they found Caroline unconscious on the bedroom floor. She had not fled. As paramedics transported her to the hospital, investigators began a full search of the apartment. What they uncovered was deeply disturbing. Among Caroline's belongings were applications for official birth certificates. The applicant name listed was not Caroline's, but Rachel's. One of Rachel's younger sisters later recalled that about a month earlier, Caroline had called and claimed she was conducting research, asking for the birth dates of all three sisters. Without suspicion, the child had provided the information. With Rachel's date of birth, Caroline had the essential detail required to request official documentation. Police also discovered a bank loan application bearing Rachel Barber's name signed on the applicant line. The pattern was unmistakable. Caroline appeared to be systematically attempting to assume Rachel's identity. Despite the extensive search, Rachel was not found in the apartment. Her whereabouts remained unknown. At that moment, the only person who could clarify events was Caroline, who remained in a coma. Hospital staff initially attributed her condition to an epileptic seizure. While doctors worked to stabilize her, detectives urgently reconstructed Caroline's movements over the previous 11 days. At the time, she was employed by a mobile telecommunications company in Melbourne. Co-workers reported that on the 2nd of May 1999, the day after Rachel disappeared, Caroline had shown up to work as usual. However, her condition was striking. She appeared pale, spoke very little, and looked physically drained, as though recovering from a serious illness. After her shift, a concerned colleague drove her home. Soon afterward, Caroline took extended sick leave and isolated herself inside her apartment. Only when police forced entry days later did they discover her unconscious. Caroline had kept diaries for years. During the search, officers seized all of them. As investigators read through the pages, they uncovered a deeply distorted inner world. One entry dated back to 1993, when Caroline was still in high school and working part-time as a babysitter. She wrote that she despised the job, resenting the time it consumed and blaming it for her academic struggles. The entries included unsettling self-portraits, sketches exaggerating her features, accompanied by harsh self-criticism. She attacked her own appearance, her body, and her entire existence. Over time, Rachel's name began appearing repeatedly in the journals. Caroline described her as a pure angel, contrasting that image with her own self-description as someone crawling in darkness. The tone revealed deep envy and fixation. In the final entries, the content became explicit. Caroline outlined a step-by-step plan to make Rachel disappear. She described using stolen identification documents to erase her own past and continue living under Rachel's identity. After being transported to the hospital, Caroline regained consciousness the following day. Confronted with evidence that could not be disputed, she remained composed and disclosed a location, a farm in Kinneton, roughly 60 kilometers from Melbourne. The property belonged to her family and was where she had spent part of her childhood. Police moved in immediately. On newly turned soil, near a small pet cemetery, investigators discovered Rachel's body. The autopsy determined the cause of death was asphyxiation, and the estimated time of death was the evening she disappeared. Some investigators later acknowledged a lingering question. Had the call been identified sooner, the outcome might have been different. When the news reached Melbourne, Rachel's parents were devastated. They struggled to accept that someone once welcomed into their home had concealed such intent. In many ways, Caroline's early life mirrored Rachel's. She was also born in Monbulk, the eldest daughter, with two younger sisters. Her father owned a farm. On paper, her path could have been stable. Yet throughout adolescence, Caroline displayed persistent self-rejection. During high school, she experienced depression, social anxiety, and isolation. She was unable to accept her appearance or her body. Attempts to confide in her parents brought little relief. Over time, her diary became the primary outlet for resentment and despair. She developed an intense fixation on a pop singer she admired, convincing herself that she was inherently unattractive and that only radical transformation, weight loss, cosmetic surgery, reinvention would make her worthy of attention. Her journals outlined rigid dieting plans and fantasies of one day standing on a stage. None of it materialized. Instead, The gap between fantasy and reality deepened her humiliation. At 16, her parents divorced. She and her sisters remained with their mother. The separation compounded her instability. She longed for her father's approval and wrote to him repeatedly, while her relationship with her mother deteriorated. In her mind, she had been unprotected and abandoned. During that period, Rachel became part of her daily life. The families lived close together. The younger children played regularly, and Rachel often invited Caroline over. What began as companionship gradually evolved into comparison. Caroline watched Rachel practice ballet in the sunlight and experienced conflicting emotions. At times, she regarded Rachel as her only friend. Eventually, admiration shifted into envy. In Caroline's perception, Rachel possessed everything she lacked: a slender figure, visible talent, a supportive family, and a future that seemed bright. The contrast intensified her self-hatred, which gradually redirected outward. After finishing high school, Caroline moved to Prahran to live independently. Physical distance did not diminish the fixation. In her thinking, Rachel embodied the life she believed should have been hers. The idea formed that if Rachel disappeared, she could step into that identity. On the evening of the 28th of May, 1999, Caroline called Rachel's home and exploited that trust. She claimed to be participating in a psychological research project, seeking volunteers, and promised payment of $100. She insisted the opportunity required strict confidentiality, even from parents. Rachel agreed. She viewed Caroline as an older, dependable figure and saw no reason for suspicion. That agreement explains her decision to leave alone after school and decline company. To her, it was a simple favor and a way to earn extra money for ballet shoes. Bringing a friend might have jeopardized the arrangement. The following afternoon, they met as planned. Rachel accompanied Caroline to the Prahran apartment. Inside, Caroline maintained a calm and friendly demeanor. During conversation, she introduced a sedative into Rachel's drink. As the drug took effect, Rachel became dizzy. Caroline described it as part of the relaxation phase of the experiment and instructed her to close her eyes and imagine a peaceful future. Rachel complied. Caroline then suffocated her. She concealed the body in a wardrobe, wrapped it in blankets, and later hired 2 men to transport what she described as a heavy stone statue to the farm property. In the days that followed, she practiced imitating Rachel's signature. She even contacted Rachel's parents under the guise of concern, attempting to normalize communication between the families so the earlier phone call would not appear suspicious. The sustained pressure culminated in a severe seizure that left Caroline unconscious in her apartment. With the evidence assembled, police formally charged her with murder. 2 weeks later, Rachel's funeral was held at Lilydale Memorial Park. Classmates, teachers, relatives, and volunteers who had searched for her gathered to pay their respects. At an age that should have marked the height of possibility, Rachel's life ended permanently. For her family, the most painful chapter was only beginning. The only course left was to wait for the legal system to deliver judgment. After months of intense public attention, the case proceeded to open trial. In court, the prosecution and defense clashed over Caroline's psychological state. Defense counsel argued that she had endured prolonged depression and severe anxiety, urging the court to consider mitigation. The prosecution countered with detailed journal entries outlining deliberate planning, clear reasoning, and defined objectives, asserting that she had acted with full awareness. After deliberation, the Supreme Court of Victoria imposed a sentence of 14 years and 6 months imprisonment without eligibility for early parole during the non-parole period. In delivering the sentence, the judge acknowledged Caroline's deep self-hatred and internal turmoil, but emphasized that personal suffering did not justify directing violence toward an innocent person. The law could not excuse such conduct. Caroline was transferred to prison and continued receiving psychological treatment while incarcerated. What intensified the family's anguish was her persistent lack of remorse. she never offered a direct apology. Reports later indicated that during her imprisonment, she focused heavily on physical training, weight loss, and altering her appearance, including straightening her previously curly hair. To Rachel's family, these changes appeared disturbingly aligned with the image of their daughter. The sense of loss remained unchanged. In 2009, encouraged by Rachel's parents and grandfather, a film based on the case was released. Watching actors reconstruct their daughter's life on screen forced renewed reflection. Elizabeth often wondered what Rachel's future might have looked like had she lived. In August 2013, after serving the required portion of her sentence, Caroline became eligible to apply for parole. For years, Rachel's parents had monitored every development related to her case. Upon learning of the application, they formally opposed her release. The parole request was denied in light of strong objections from the victim's family. 2 years later, she was granted conditional release. She was 37 years old. In a post-release interview, Caroline complained that public reaction to the film adaptation had caused her mother and sisters to lose employment and relocate repeatedly. Although she acknowledged responsibility for the crime, her comments centered largely on the consequences to her own family. She did not issue an apology to Rachel. She later entered a relationship with a woman she met while incarcerated. Both had served prison sentences. Reports described their life as stable. After more than a decade of enduring grief, Rachel's family made a difficult decision. They publicly stated that they forgave Caroline and asked the public to cease harassment so that she could attempt to contribute positively to society. Their only request was to avoid further information about her. Despite expressing forgiveness, Elizabeth continued to live with unease, concerned that unresolved obsession might resurface elsewhere. Another person never escaped. May 1999. Manny, Rachel's boyfriend. For over 20 years, he has marked May 1 each year with a public tribute. He later became a professional singer. His debut song, Too Beautiful, was written in her memory, each line reflecting enduring loss. If Rachel had not followed Caroline that day, her future might have unfolded differently. That possibility ended in 1999. Caroline believed that removing Rachel would allow her to assume the life she envied, and she was wrong. A life can be taken. The impact of that life cannot be replaced. The legal proceedings have long concluded, but the consequences of this case have never fully faded. Some losses cannot be measured in years, and certain wounds remain beyond the reach of time. Thank you for watching through to the end of today's video. If you are interested in real criminal cases, the stories behind violent acts, and the hidden aspects of human behavior, follow the channel to stay updated on future case files. Goodbye, and until next time.